Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today representing Ecommerce Europe, the European association representing merchants selling services and goods online all across the continent. I am very happy also to cover today some of the discussions that we've been following in Brussels, and of course try to connect them and reflect on all the topics that have already been discussed. I think indeed many of those topics were already addressed throughout the various discussions that happened, because it's obvious, we've all been through the same thing in the past year, so we tend to be looking at the same things, and of course the issues that matters to you in Portugal in relation to payments go way beyond the border of Portugal and affect everyone in the EU. And I would even go as far as saying that those topics and topics that we've been discussing go way beyond the borders of the EU itself. So I will take some time today to sort of connect some of those issues with some forward-looking policy development that we're keeping us busy in Brussels at the moment. I think, to echo what has been said for the past weeks or months, I mean, we can all agree that the COVID-19 pandemic has been has considerably accelerated some of the changes that we were already looking at before the crisis, especially when it comes to the evolution of the retail sector altogether, but also the evolution of digital payments. And I think so one of those aspects that was already present before and somehow continues to grow is the strategic importance of payments. Indeed, I think payments have become a massively strategic issue for merchants. Of course, I mean, you all know that better than I do, that, with the retail sector evolving really fast together with consumer expectations, making the right choices on the partners you rely on, the services that you acquire, but also even the payment choices, decision that you make for your consumers are more and more important. But what we see at European level as well is that payments is a strategic issue for governments, which adds a new layer of discussions as well to certain of the topics that we're looking at. And indeed, you can see that some of the issues that we're discussing, such as instant payment, that I'll come back on a bit later, but also the whole idea of digital currency and government-backed digital currency, everything is very influenced by, how can payment be used as a strategic autonomy tool for member state and for the EU. So that creates a very interesting discussion, of course, at European level when you try to find the right building blocks to make the need of, like a strategic need of merchants that meets maybe the strategic needs of governments as well. Of course, we expect quite a lot of development. All those different developments are always linked together. But I've tried to maybe define three main objectives that we see being pursued at European level, and sort of go through, what are the different files that we expect and development that we see in relation to those topics. I think one of the most important and something that was actually discussed in one of the panel is, how do we make sure that stakeholders in Europe can leverage digital innovation and digitalization in order to grow simply. And I think it's interesting, of course, because when we talk about digitalization of payment and leveraging financial technologies and so on, we often rely on the Payment Services Directive too, which I'm pretty sure you're all familiar with. I mean, it kept most people busy in the sector for a couple of years. And, it basically laid the foundation for new services and new technologies and new payment options as well to develop in the EU. I think, we often say that the PSD2, Payment Service Directive 2, was not a big bang. There hasn't been an overnight change in how we pay and the services that we use, and we still have, a payment market which remains quite stable. And yet we can still see that there is new services being created on the back of those legislative changes. And it's really interesting to see that the Commission intends to go further. So when you look at some of the successes of open banking, first the question is, how do we make this a more tangible reality to more people? And how do we continue the work that we already created under this specific file? And the PSD2 will actually the Commission will decide if and how it wants to revise this important directive. So we'll definitely have a lot more discussion upcoming on everything related to open finance, with the Commission intended to create an open finance framework, also, again, to take the whole discussion a lot further. And in parallel, we'll have a lot of discussion on access and sharing of data, actually way beyond just financial data, but as a common thinking in the EU, or how to maximize and leverage the data that European creates in a safe and useful way, basically. So this will be definitely something to look for, because it interacts with a lot of other topics such as fintech, instant payments. So definitely, I think a big chunk of work ahead. And something to mention, because I mentioned it a bit earlier as well, when you talk about digitalization, we also have to talk about digital currency, which is another possible, very impactful development on the EU payment markets. And the European Commission has been looking very closely at projects such as Libra, and has already, most of you probably know, started working with the European Central Bank on defining the possibility to create or issue a digital euro. Of course, this is a big project that would have a big impact on how we pay in Europe. And it's not a decision that the Commission takes lightly. So I think we expect the European Central Bank and the European Commission to, by this summer, give some indication on whether this would actually be a feasible project, and then whether they give the green light to starting the work on such a huge piece of legislation, not only actually technical modification and then everything that goes with creating your own digital currency. So this is definitely one of the most, it will be one of the most talked about changes, I think, in the coming months and years, and will definitely require merchants' participation in, what do you expect from digital payments, and what are the key, things that you need to be taken into account in order to ensure that digital innovation can actually benefit merchants and consumers as well. A second topic, which is a lot more narrow, but still quite important to look at, in my opinion, from a policy perspective, is the whole discussion on authentication and identification of consumers and businesses online. I will not dive into too much detail about strong customer authentication. I think it's still in everyone's mind. It's certainly been on our mind for many months. But of course, it will. I think the only thing we can I'll mention about SCA is that there will be a need to assess the concrete impact of SCA, of course, on consumer expectations, but also on the real impact on fraud. So to what extent the changes we've made turn out to be useful? What is the actual impact on fraud on the market? And this will have to be done, I think, in consultation, very close consultation with all actors of the payment chain as well. But of course, beyond SCA, it's interesting to look at other developments that could influence the way we actually identify people online. And I think something I wanted to mention today that's of interest to e-commerce Europe is also the development of a European digital identity. So as you probably know, I actually do not know in Portugal to what extent digital identity is already, entering people's habits. This is quite uneven. in Europe. Obviously, not everyone has access to a well-functioning digital identity for public services, and it's even less true, of course, if you look at a business solution based on digital identity. But at the same time, we know that an increased demand for trust, an increased demand for security, and an increased demand at the same time for a seamless experience will make relying on those new, well, not just technologies, but on those new tools all the more important. So we actually expect the European Commission a bit before this summer to come up with a legislative proposal on European digital identity. So it will be really interesting to see how business can fit in there, not only, of course, from a business to consumer perspective, but also other tools that could be useful for businesses that are more and more digitalized, especially after the COVID-19 crisis. And maybe last but not least, I think a very important focus in terms of policy development and policy discussions in Brussels will center around the development of the EU's efforts to make the EU retail payment market more competitive and more transparent. So that's also a big chunk of work. I think, I mentioned PSD2 already, and one of the key ambition of PSD2 was to make the market more competitive and more transparent, also by allowing, new actors to try to shake things up. But of course, we all know that there's a lot more work to be done in this area. And, that is why the European Commission is actually putting so much energy and time in researching instant payment, in the opportunity of instant payment. They really believe that instant payment-based solutions could be a way forward to create more competition on the market. Also, of course, with the ambition of having a pan-European instant payment-based solution. It's a very long name for quite a simple concept. But of course, this will be a key aspect of the discussion. The European Commission is actually currently consulting stakeholders on, what are the expectations in relation to instant payment to ensure that there's a swift and very inclusive uptake when solutions are actually coming up of the ground. And to conclude, maybe I think it's interesting to place this discussion on a wider discussion on competition and cost of payments, which is certainly something we look at from an e-commerce Europe perspective. As some of you may know, the European Commission decided last year not to reopen the interchange fee directive, but this topic, in our opinion, will still remain quite high on the agenda one way or another as well. So something to look out for in combination to this. I think, so this is basically, in our opinion, sort of the three main objectives from an EU perspective. And of course, it's really interesting to see how that influences and how the European Commission takes also inspiration from member states that are definitely advanced on those questions, such as Portugal. So thank you very much again for having me today. And please do not hesitate to reach out to Ecommerce Europe if you have any additional question.